Welcome to N=12 in N+1 days of MvvmCross. And starting with N=12, I'd like to spend probably 3 or 4 episodes, 3 or 4 of these N+1s, going through a full app. So I'm not going to just do a particular control. I'm actually going to go further, and hopefully we'll demo all sorts of things. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to talk about something like a collecting app. It's not going to use any network resources at the moment, but it is going to focus on offline collecting. And what I think I need within this app is almost certainly I'm going to need a home page. So this page might show the latest thing you've collected, and then we'll see where it goes from there. I'm then going to want to be able to add things to my collection. So maybe this is going to be a bird spotting app or something like that. So I'll add a bird that I've spotted. Maybe it will be a bug spotting or a flower spotting. Maybe it's a house spotting. Maybe it's a person spotting. Maybe I'm a celebrity spotter or something. Maybe it's train spotting. And I want to add a picture of them. I want to say where I spotted them, and then I want to record it. So it'll be geolocation and pictures included. I then want a list page, so somewhere where I can see everything, and maybe I want search in that. Maybe I want a map in that eventually. I'll then want edit and delete functionality. So if I've taken a bad one, or I've summoned a celebrity I don't want to support anymore, I might want to delete them. And then there's going to be share functionality that I want to add. So that's my basic app. And what I'll do in this series is I'll start with just one platform and then spread it out to the other platforms. So let's kick in. And what we want to do is we want to create a portable class library as ever. This is going to go in N12, and what can I call this app? I will call this app Collectible. If you've ever been to a town called Bulls in New Zealand, you'll know why it's called Collectible. If you haven't, you won't. And so this is going to be collectible.core. Here's my app name. I don't need to do that, and I will just hit OK. And then our normal selections of not Xbox, but Monotouch, Monodroid, Xamarin Twins, and Mango and Higher. Hit OK, it goes off and generates things. Get rid of class 1, we don't want that. Go to NuGet. And let's pull in, just to start with, let's just pull in MvvmCross. That'll do to start with. So we pull in the core framework. Then what else do we think we might need to pull in? Well, I said we would want to pull in SQLite, so let's find SQLite and pull that in. And what else might we want to pull in? We probably would like to pull in the messenger, because most of my apps use a messenger, so let's pull that in. And for now, let's leave it as that. We're almost certainly going to want location later, and we'll want the picture taking later, and we'll probably want visibility and other things. But for now, that's a very good starting place that we've already got. So let's concentrate on the data for now. Okay, so we've pulled all those things in. Hopefully this builds. So now let's start adding in some services. So we create a folder. There's no big plan here, so this is kind of a genuine development. And we know that within services we're going to want a data store, so let's put a data service in there, data store. And our data store, let's start creating our service in there. So what is our data type going to look like? Well, the main thing we're going to want is our collection. So this is going to be a collected item, shall we call it? A collected item is a bit boring, isn't it? Let's call it a collected item. I can't think of anything else to call it at the moment, so I'll call it that. Right, so this is going to be a data item, so we're going to turn it into a public class like that. And then we'd like to add obviously an int ID, which is going to be the main ID field. And to make it into the main ID field, we're going to add a primary key to it, which obviously we'll pull in using Alt Enter, we'll pull in the SQLite attributes. And we want SQLite to work out the incrementing. Then let's see what else we can do on this. Let me just make the font size a little bit larger for you. So we would probably like to have a caption. We'd probably like to have, we said we'd like to have location with it. Yeah, so there are various ways we can do location, but let me add a bool saying location known. and let me add the lat and long as well. So you could have done this using nullables, but I don't really like doing that at the moment, so I'm just going to do this, lat and long. So that's my location sorted. You could also have spread this out into multiple tables as well if you wanted to, but it seemed better to put this in there. So that's our location information. We've got our caption. We might also want to add a image. Now, how are we going to add an image? I guess it's a bit hard to add an image because we could actually, within SQLite, use a byte array here, but I think it would be better if we used a local file to store the image, and then in this app, in this database, we should just store a path to that file. You know, we could even key it, in fact, off of the ID, the file name. Yeah, but for now I'll use image path, that's fine. And we'll probably use some sort of GUID generation or something to get the image file name later. So that's that, and I guess maybe we'd want, you know, another string which is going to be notes. So you can have a bit longer in there. And perhaps you'd also want a date time saying when. And because I quite like having my dates, you know, in UTC, and so that they're fixed dates and everyone knows where they are, I'm just going to put them in UTC in the database as well. You may get some problems when you try and pull it out of the database that actually SQLite net puts it back to local or time zone unknown, but we'll know that when we stored it, it was UTC. So that's my collected item, and now let's try and build, you know, kind of the data functionality we want around that. So what we'll create is a repository. So we'll just call this repository, yeah, because we're only going to have one of them. And so the repository, we will again make it a little bit larger. Let's start actually with the interface for this guy. And what sort of functionality do we want on the repository? Well, we know that we'd quite like just to get the list of everything out. It's never going to be a huge database, so we could just, you know, we don't really need filtering at this stage for this database. So we're just going to have a method called all, yeah, which is reasonable. We then would also quite like to have a method to add. So let's do it. We're going to have a void add collected item. And we then like to have a method for remove. Because we're going to delete these things, so let me call it delete. And again, you could possibly use the ID for delete, but that should be okay for now. And then we'd like to have an update. So that's our interface for our database at the moment. Yeah, it's not too complicated. It's just a simple repository with those guys. So let's implement it. So that's public class repository iRepository. And if you haven't seen this before, then go back to, I think it was n=10, which was the SQLite introduction, and we'll implement the members. They'll obviously come in stubs, but in order to do that, we need to get hold of a SQLite connection. So we'll add one. SQLite connection _connection, and we'd quite like to initialize that in our constructor. So let me add that as a read only. So let's add a constructor, and the way that we initialize these guys is that actually what we need is an SQLite collection factory called factory, and what we need to do on it is we need to use the factory to get hold of the connection. So we'll do connection dot factory. We will do connection equals factory dot create, and then we pass in the name, if you like, of the database we want, and this is going to be collectible collect.sql is what I'll call it. So that's going to be our database name. Now you may need to tweak that later. You know, we may need to look at perhaps putting it in SD card storage or something. For now, that's fine. Okay, so that's our connection done. Factory creates done. That's cool. So the next thing we need to do is actually create the table, or ensure that the table's created. And we know it's a collected item that's going to be in that table, and that's it. So that's the constructor sorted for our connection. Then we're going to have these lists and things of our data. So to return the list, all we do is connection.table, and it's the name of the table's collected item, and we just want to return the whole lot. what we should probably do is we'll order those just to make sure they are. They're probably going to be ordered anyway, but let's just do it. And we're going to order them by, let's do them in reverse order. So we're going to order them by descending the date they were taken. So that's x dot, what was it called, when UTC. So there's our table, there's the order by, and there's the to list, which will actually do the select. Then we'd like to add one. So to do that, we just do connection dot insert the collected item. We might want to delete one. To do that, we do connection dot delete and the collected item. And then we might want to update one. So this is our database pretty much done. Can't think of much else we want to do on there. And you can see it's all very straightforward to have done. So hopefully that builds still. Let me just check. Okay, so let's also just make sure that we can keep up to date with our code. We'll just use resharper to make sure everything's in the right place. So that's our data store, that's our repository. I quite like, in terms of my app, to actually have a singleton in place. And this singleton I'd quite like just to maintain a list of items at all times. So I don't really want my view models accessing my repository directly. Instead, I'm going to get them to go via my collection service. So I'm going to have a collections folder. I don't know if you can see what I've added there. And in there, I'm going to add a collection service. So let's do it. So this collection service, again, I'll zoom in. This collection service, what sort of interface do we want on here? Let's add an interface again, collection service. So what I'd quite like is I would quite like to be able to use this collection service to get hold of everything, I guess. So that'll be the list page will enable me to get hold of these things. So let's try doing that. And what I will do is I will have again a list of what were they called? They were called collected item. Sorry, I couldn't think of a better name. If I'd been using a specific example like wine bottles or bird spotting, it might have been easier. So we're going to have a list of collected item, which again we'll just call it all because it's probably going to pass through. And then there'll be other methods that we'll add later. And we'll probably also, if you've watched any of the messenger examples, we'll probably add some messages that this guy will also send out when things change. So let's start with that. So we're going to start with a public class collection service. I could spell public again, it would help. So that has to inherit from my collection service. And this is probably going to be a singleton, as we know. And what we need is we probably need that this collection service is going to use that repository. It's going to be an underscore repository. And because it's obviously not going to get initialized by our IOC container, we'll set it up that way. So there's the repository. And so what this can return at the moment is it can just return all, but I suspect it's going to actually cache this at a later date. So it won't continue to return all forever. So that's going to be our collection service. We will use resharper to put things in their own separate files, and that's it. And then what we need to do is we need to check in the app that this is all going to work. So we've got our default rule at the moment, which says that anything that's called service gets registered as a lazy singleton. But we didn't call our repository, it doesn't end in service, so this won't work. So instead what I'll do is I will actually, I could put in a rule like this. I could say, well, actually, if there's a creatable type and it ends in repository, then please also register it as lazy singletons. Or I could, if I wanted to, actually do a register. So I could do a .register singleton, and I could actually just register one by default by doing iRepository. equals new repository. And that would actually enable me to do it. But let me just stick with this rule. So all I've done is add another rule in here. So as well as registering services, we're also going to register repositories. That's cool. This should still build. And then we get on to our view models. So as I said when we were quickly going through this, we want a home page. So let's start with the home page. So we don't really want this first view model, so let me rename it. It's no longer called first, it's now called home. And this home view model, well, what would we like on there? So we said we'd like to be able to go to a list. We said we'd like to be able to go to add. And that's probably it, isn't it? That's all we really need to do at the moment. I also said we might want a latest or perhaps a random or something that goes on there. So let's do that, and let's do so we're going to create a property, and our first property is going to be this random. So this is going to be a random collected item, and it's going to be random. Let me call it first. First sounds good. So we'll just create the latest collected item that's going to go on the front. So there's our latest, and obviously to pull that in we need to import the type. So that's going to be our latest. We'd also quite like, which means we'll probably need to put that back in the services as well. We'd then like these commands to go to the list and to the add, so let's add them. So there's a CMVX shortcut, and this is going to be the add command. To add. So that's done, but obviously we haven't, implemented it yet, so there's still to do there. And let's add another one, and this is going to be the show the list command. So again, we'll just add them in here. CMVX, and this is a list command. Quite often I wouldn't use a snippet for this because I could just put it all in line, but just for now, so I don't confuse anyone, I will do that. So there's our list command done as well, and that's our home page. But we obviously need to initialize some things. So let's get hold of the CTOR. What we probably would like is our collection service here. So let's add it. We'd like access to this guy. So here's our collection service. We'll make it read only so we don't ever accidentally get rid of it. And the collection service here will equal a collection service that gets passed in. So we'll just rely on the IOC to create one of those for us. So there's our home view model. We haven't initialized latest when we first start up there. So what we'd probably want to do is latest equals underscore collection service dot. So we don't have that. We've got all at the moment. So let's add a latest. Yeah. Which probably means we're going to have to add it all the way through. So let's go to iCollectionService. We say we want to add a latest. So let's add it. So we'd like collected item, latest, get. Obviously it can return a null, so we need to work that one through. And collection service now doesn't implement that, so let's use ReSharper again to implement it. And so this is going to have a latest, and so to do the latest we have to go through and we have to return repository.latest. In fact we may as well use property there as well. So we don't have a latest method on the repository, so we have to go back and add it to there. So again, we'd quite like here to have a collected item, the latest get, which means that in the repository now we have to add that as well. So let me use ReSharper to help out a little bit. And then what's the SQL or the link that we need? It's very similar to the link we had before, so we'll just add it. And what we need to do is we need to return the first or default in that list. So there is our there's our latest. That should be implemented all the way through. We should be able to build again. Yep, it's saying one error. What have I done? It's just because I originally created it as that. So there's our latest setup. Let's just put that line in the view model in its own method. called update latest, because we might want to call that again. Okay, so that's that shouldn't have been removed. I don't know why it wanted to do that. That's okay. So we're going to call update latest. We may want to do that again later. We may want to, get hold of a messenger, and perhaps when somebody adds something to the database, we're going to have to update latest again. So I'm just putting it into a new method all on its own. So that hopefully builds as a project now. We could now start looking at some of these other pages. So let's do that. So let's now add the add page, because the add page is going to be pretty important to us. The add view model, because without it we can't actually get any data into our system. So let's do it. So we're going to add an add view model, and again, I'll zoom in a bit for you guys. So this guy is going to be a public class add view model. I'm going to want inherit from MvvmViewModel, and that gives us our add. So what do we want within this? So we will need access to our collection service again, so let's do that. Private read-only iCollectionService. And already you can start to feel, as we type this, that perhaps this collection service should be going into a base class of both our view models, because you start to feel that actually I'm passing this in 2 places, so maybe I should actually be having, instead of an MvvmViewModel, I should be having a base class. But for now, again, we'll keep that as it is. That's okay. And then we need to actually have our fields for add. So how are we going to do this? So we would like to have a public, we would like to have a field for everything that's going to be in our view. So how do we do this? So we know that in our collected item we'd like to have these fields. So the chances are we'd also like to have all of these fields. Let me just drag them in, except ID obviously. We'd like to have all of these represented somehow in our view, in our view model. So let's just make some more room here. So we'd obviously like to have this caption, so let's add it so that people can enter it. And this is going to be a caption. That's one done. We've got notes we'd like to add, so let's add it. String notes. We've then got when. So when we can actually generate for ourselves and shouldn't really be displayed to the user. So we'll actually not display when. We'll fill that in ourselves when we need to. Location we shouldn't really need to know either, but what might be useful is a little flag or something that says whether or not we've got location lock. So let's set that for ourselves. Let's actually just have a location. And so to pull location in, we know we need to pull in the location plugin, so let's do it. Let's go to the NuGet official source and go to MvvmCross. And in here we'll find the location plugin and we'll drag it in. And if you can't remember the location plugin, that was covered in maybe 8 or 9, or maybe both. And so you need that one pulled in as well. So to do location, we'll probably want to add another service. So let's do it. Add new folder. Services. So this is going to be location, I'll call it. And this is going to be a singleton that we want. So let's drag him in again. Add new class. This is going to be the location service. And again, I'll zoom in a bit. So this is, again, let's start with an interface, public interface of iLocationService. Not sure what I need in that interface at the moment, so let me leave it. But let me implement the singleton. And so the singleton I'd quite like to have, once it's created, I just want it listening for information about location. It's a bit naughty to do this from the point of view of battery life, but our app hopefully won't chew too much, so just don't tell anyone what I'm about to do. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a private read-only IMVX geolocation watcher. See if that's right. Yep, and that's a watcher. And I'd like to have that passed into me using IOC and all that stuff, so that's good. And then what I'd like to do is when I get created, I want to actually start it. So I call watcher.start going to pass in the default options, and then I'm going to pass in the on success and the on error. So now I need to generate those two methods. That's on error and that's on success. So what I'd like to do with the location is when it comes in, I'd actually like to broadcast the location to anyone who might be listening. And so to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a message. And that's going to be a location message. And the location message is obviously going to inherit from the MvvmCross message because that's the way that the messenger works. And that obviously requires a constructor. And so the type of message that we typically like to send is just going to have, let's make it as simple as possible, double lat, double long. Yeah, and then let's put a method in here. Let's put some parameters, some properties in here to do that. So this is a prop, and it's double lat. Let's make those private so they can only be set by the constructor, or by the class itself anyway. And so to do that we do lat equals lat, long equals, oops, I've got to do a semicolon. So there's our location message. So now what we need to do is make sure we send it. So when the location service gets started, we will pass in a messenger. And we'll keep hold of a reference to that messenger. So again, we'll just do this, private read only, messenger. If you're going too fast, by all means, come back to the code. It'll be on GitHub. And also, by all means, go back to the earlier tutorials where I talk about messengers and I talk about location, and you'll see exactly the same code, but just, I go through it a bit more slowly. So when we get this location in, then we will do, again, I'm not going to worry about the error situation. I probably should. I should probably at least put a trace in. So we do that, MvvmCross.warning, error scene during location, bracket 0. And what I'll do is I'll just rename that thing to error, and then I'll be able to at least do error.code. So there's my on error handler, but when on success happens, what I'd like to do is I'd like to create a message. It's going to be a location message, and the parameters are this, location.coordinates.lat and location.coordinates.long. So there we create our new message. And when we've got our message, we want to just publish it. So we go to the messenger that we got during our constructor, and we go messenger.publish, and we just pass in the message. So that's our location service done. And again, I'm just going to, I just still don't think there's anything I need in our location service itself. So I'm just going to refactor that, so that we get our separate files. And then what I'd like to do is back in the add view model, I'd like to get hold of that location service. So let's make sure that it gets passed in. And I guess I'd also like the messenger passed in to me, so I'll do that as well. MvvmCross. And so the location service, I will store a reference to. I don't know if I need it at the moment, but it's useful to have around for if I do need that. iLocationService underscore location service. And then the messenger I am actually just going to use, because what I'd like to do with the messenger is I'd like to do messenger, I haven't actually stored that pointer, underscore location service equals location service. But with the messenger I'd like to subscribe, and just to be safe what I'm going to do is I'm going to subscribe on the main thread. So I'm going to subscribe for our types of location message, and the parameters to this are simply the action that I'd want. So it's going to be called onLocation, the method, and hopefully I should be able to create it for me. So you can see here's the method that will get called, and we're guaranteeing it's going to be called on the main thread. And when we get that, I will be able to set here some properties, which is where we started. So let me add some properties: location, known, lat and long, and let me do that. PMVX bool so there's the location known property, and then I'd like some lat and long. One thing, if you're looking at this and thinking, oh, it's a bit longhand on these properties, one thing that might be worth looking at is there is a plugin for Visual Studio, and I think it also works in Xamarin Studio, called Fody. And Fody can actually use aspect-oriented programming to generate some of these methods for you. There's some of these long raised property change properties for you, so it might be worth looking at that if you want to. But I'll get on with this. So I'm going to create latitude and then longitude. So those are fired up. So there's our lat and our long and our location known, and all I'm going to do is when I get this location method in, I'm going to set location known equals true, because by default I've just got a location. Latitude I'm going to set to location.lat, and longitude I'm going to set to location.long. Now those eagle eye among you will have noticed here I made a mistake, because when I subscribed I did say before that there's a return from this, which is a subscription token, and you have to make sure you store that subscription token, otherwise you will never get the subscriptions that you want, because it uses weak messaging, weak referencing. So let me just add that as a token. Here we go, underscore token. And the reason it uses weak referencing is well, firstly to stop leaks occurring, but secondly it's very convenient because it means that the unsubscribe from this messenger will happen automatically when this view model disappears. You don't need to actually manually unsubscribe. So we've got latitude and longitude down here. Next up is image path, and that's our final one. So let's actually, I'm probably going to delay image until the next part of this tutorial. So let me just leave this as a to-do. Yeah, but what we do need in here is we do need a way of saving this image. So let's do that. Let's create a command. This is going to be called save command. So we create the save command, and this is called do save. So we've got our save command, and it's in here that we actually want to do something. So within here we want to check that we've got enough information. So let's just put in a few validations. So let's put in a method called validate actually. Private bool validate, and validate is going to add, let's just do this, if caption, and if it's empty then we're not going to allow it to save. So if string.is null or empty caption, return false. Otherwise pretty much any other data is okay by me. So we'll just do that. So there's a very simple validation routine, and that should be okay. And in fact we could probably call this recursively if we wanted to. So later on, again, we'll put in to do, would be nice if the edit auto validated. So we could do things like, you know, enabling and disabling the button. So there's a validate. Let's take that through. And what we're going to do is we are going to have validate. So if we fail to validate, then we just return. We don't want to do any action here. Otherwise, what we'd quite like to do is create a collected item. New collected item. So you can see that's there, and we pull that in using resharper. And the type of things we'd like in here is we'd like to set the caption equal to our caption. We'd like to set the ID, obviously we're going to leave for the database to do. The image path is to do. As we said, we're not going to try and save the picture at the moment. Lat is going to be our latitude. Long is going to be our longitude. Location known is going to be our location known. Notes is going to be our notes. And when is going to be the moment we hit save. So what we do in here is we do datetime.utc now. And hopefully you can see that's creating our collected item. And then what we need to do is store it. So I think we had a collection service dot. So here we don't have a method to store. So we're going to have to go back to the interface and just add that method. So we'd like to have a collected item add method. So we're going to have void add collected item. And perhaps you might actually want to do the validation here rather than in the view model. We can move that later if that's the case, and we'll work out how that works. But for now we'll do that. I'm going to public void add collected item, and we'll have to add that into the repository as part of our method. And what you might do is after you've added, you might want to send out a message here. So after you've added that item, you might want to actually send a message. But for now, we're just going to leave it as that. So that's our collection layer, which has now got a collected item in there. So the collection service now, we've got an add method, so we call that. And then after we've called the add method, what we probably want to do is we probably want to close our own view model. So we'll just call close this, and that's a base class method that tries, can't guarantee it, but it tries within the UI view layers to close the current view model. I'll talk more about that later, hopefully, but it depends really on how you've designed your UI. But what this does, this close call, is it sends a message to the UI layer saying, can you close the view that corresponds to this view model? And it's up to you. If you've done some, weird and wonderful tab display, and then maybe you can't close it. But it does its best, is what I will say for it. So hopefully we could build this. And then I think the only thing we haven't really done is these kind of calls here. So let's do it. So what we'd quite like to do is do an add. And so to do the add, what we're going to do is we're going to show the view model that's add. So here we go. And we still do have a to-do for showing the list, which we can do there. So let's add a list view model. So we're going to add a list view model. Again, I'll zoom in a bit for you. So this is a public class list view model. We want to inherit from MvvmCross. As with the other view models, again, it's beginning to smell like we really should have a base class for this. We're going to add a private collection service. It's going to be the collection service. It's going to be read only, and we'll use resharper to generate the field from the constructor. So that will get passed into us. And what we'd like to do in this collection is we would just like to have a list of everything that's actually displayed currently. So let's do that. Let's have a public, so we can do that again using a property, PMVX, and we'll have a list of collected item. Collected, so we'll call it items because that's a nice convenient name for these, and we will then call the whole list items. So we would like to actually fill that list up. So what we'll do when we create the view model, we will get those from the collection service, and that's just using the all method. Yeah, and obviously there's a resolution to do that. And that's it for now. Later on, we will want to do navigation from the collected item to a detail screen, or perhaps to an edit screen. So we'll have to come across that. But for now, this is just a simple list view. So back in home view, we can navigate to it. Let's do that. So this is going to be a show view model, and this is a list view model we want to show. So that's it. That's our 3 pages basically done. Let's see if it builds. So we've got a basic app in terms of server side. Let's add our first UI, and the UI I'm going to add is, let me add a Windows one. I don't often start with Windows Store, or I could start with Windows Phone. For now, let me start with Windows Phone because it is my favorite platform, so that's good. So let's choose Windows Phone, choose Windows Phone app, and this is going to be collect bull dot phone, and I'm going to target Windows Phone 7 again, Mango. And what we get here, and this is done as we get our kind of standard main page, so we'll get rid of that. And what we want to do is add a reference. Oops, let me add the reference to the core first. So in our solution we can add a reference to our core. You can see that straightforward, and we hit OK. And then we'd like to add a reference to some of our MvvmCross NuGet packages. So we know that we want the same sort of set as earlier, so that was, we want the main pack, we would like the location, we will want the file eventually, but we haven't used that yet. We'd like the messenger, and we'd like the SQLite. So it's important that you get everything here that you had in the core, but beyond that there's nothing else that we particularly need at the moment, so we'll close that. You can see there's quite a few assemblies added in now, but again, that's all managed for us, so we don't mind too much. We know from past things that there are a couple of bits of boilerplate we have to add into the core, so we'll do that. These are here. So we add those in, and then there's the setup we also need to add in. Let's add them in. So hopefully, yeah, that should all build. Let me just check it builds. Okay, so that seems to have built successfully. I also know that because I've got multiple debuggers all using virtualization, I want to go back to the Windows Phone 7. I want to actually debug this, so I'll do that. That's done. And then I'm on to views. So we don't really need first view anymore. So let me just delete it. What we do need is we need home view. So let's add a home view. Windows Phone portrait, home view. See if I can close this down. So here's our home view, and so this is going to be called collectible. And the page name is home. You might want to use some other display here. Perhaps we'll use panorama or something in the future, but for now this will do fine. And what we want is just the most basic display here at the moment. So we'd like to have a collected item. So for the now we'll just leave a text box saying text equals to do a collected item. So there's nothing in our display at the moment for that. And then what we'd like to do is we'd like to have a button for adding a collected item, a new item. Again, buttons might not be the way we want to go eventually, but for now this should be alright. So we're going to have button content equals add, and the command for this is going to be the binding to the add command. And then we'd also like to have a button to go to the list. And again, you might want to use this different ways. Perhaps we'll have a application bar down the bottom to do this, but that should be good. And so there are our two commands. I forgot, however, as you will no doubt have noticed, that this by default has become a phone application page, and what I'd like instead is I'd like that to be an MVX phone page, so I'll just do that. It generates that for me, and I will do that in the home view as well. So we add that. So there's our phone page done for home, and then we need to add these other guys, so let's add them in. And we've got a add, so this is going to be a new item again, and so we've got an add view. We add him in, come back to the XAML, and again we need to change this over to an MVX phone page, so we'll do that. and we'd like to add this one over to an MVX phone page, so we'll do that. So there's our phone page, and so this is going to be the add. So again, I'll change this, it should hopefully go in a string somewhere rather than be in line each time, but we'll keep doing it for now. So this is collectible, and this is going to be add. And so on this page, we've got quite a few views that quite a few fields that we'd like to fill in. So let's start filling them. Let's, in the content, add a stack panel, and we're probably going to want this as a scroll rather than just a grid. So let's add these within a stack panel, within a scroll. And what we'd like to add is we'd like to add the fields that we've got in our view model. So let's go to add view model, which is here. And we know we've got basically these fields that we want to fill in, which is caption, notes, and then we'd probably like to have a little, green light or something for location known. So we'll just slowly work on that one. Let's start with a text box, which is going to be the text is going to be binding to the caption. And I think with this we could also, if we wanted to, put a max length in, but for now I'm going to leave it because it's up to the users if they want to go over the limit. And then we probably would like a caption with that, so let's add a caption, text block, text equals, and this is going to be what? And there's styling you might want to add, but I'll leave that for a later moment. We then got, after that we've got the notes. And then we've got something that's going to tell us whether or not we have location. And that's just really up to the view model. It's not something the user can actually set. So what we'll have is we'll have a little flag that says location. And then what I'll do is I'll create a checkbox, and is checked I'm going to bind to location known in the view model, but I'm always going to just leave this so that it's a disabled control. And then the final thing we need is a button that says OK. So we're going to do a button, content equals OK, binding. Command equals binding, and this is going to be the save command. Was it save or add command? I'll have to go and look. In the add view model we had a save command is what I called it. So that's our add view, and looks reasonable enough at the moment. It looks like that should fit together. Obviously you probably wouldn't put this in as a button, you probably would use an application bar for this, but that's design. We can change that after we've done the first rev of this. And let's just see if that looks okay. Yeah, that looks reasonable. You probably would want to edit that checkbox a little bit more. So you probably would, how do I do that? Go back to the XAML, and the checkbox you'd probably want to add some content saying location known. Then you can get rid of that. So that will now look like, if I can come back to the XAML, that will now look like that. So there'll be a location known. You might want to change the styling of this, that's just styling, so I'm not too worried about that. So here's our collectible, we've got an OK. Obviously we're going to want to add a lot more to this in terms of images and things, and we'll come back to that in later things. We might want to add a little map that tells us a bit more about location known. We'll come back to those as we do it, as we progress this example. So that's add done, I think. So the final one we want to do is the list view model. So the list view, so let's add that. Add new item, list view. And again we go through a similar process of, we don't want a phone application page, we want a phone, we want a MVX phone page. We add that in, and in the list view we're going to do the same thing. Take that and do the phone page. And then what we'd like to do is this grid we'd actually like to replace with a list. So I'll just put it inside now for now. This is going to be a list box. Its items source is going to be bound to the items, And we would probably like to use a nice template for this, so let's do listbox.item template, and inside there we'll use a data template, and inside the data template we will use let's just for now just use a text block. Text block text equals, and we're going to bind that to the caption. But we'll put some margin around it, so let's just put a margin equals, and again it's Windows Phone, so we'll use a multiple of 12, margin of 24. So that's our a list view done, and what we probably want is, you know, have page type list, and again we would change this using some sort of resource mechanism for my application. But for now, collect. Bull. So this is our app. Hopefully this all builds, and hopefully we can now deploy it. So when we deploy, let's see what happens. Goes off to our emulator and deploys. Okay, so the first thing you'll notice is I've messed up my home page, so let's go back and take a look at what my home page is. I think I just put everything inside a grid, which is a bit silly. So let me put a stack panel in place, and then we put those 3 controls inside a stack panel. That will make more sense, and let's just see what that looks like in the designer. It's there to help us. So you can see we've still got that to do at the top, then we've got an add and a list. So now let's go back and do a debug start new. That gives us, you can see we've got a to-do for our most recent. If we first of all go to list, then you'll see it's very empty because there's nothing in our database. If we go to add, then if we hit OK, nothing happens, and that's because we've got a little bit of validation. But if we first go to what, and then I'm just using the hardware keyboard here just for speed, and we go, you know, I saw a mouse, and we might add some, you know, some help here of where they're on the stair type things. And you can see also that location known has become checked in the background. And if we are OK, and did that save? What we're seeing here is that we've got a file exception, so we might need to go and debug that. But it does look like we didn't get a close. So let's take a look and see whether or not there's an issue here. And what we'll do is we'll put some breakpoints in and see whether or not things are happening. So let's put a validate in, and let's try again. So we hit our validate button, and we are failing to validate. So it looks like caption isn't being set, and there's a very simple reason for that, and that's because we are in Windows Phone, and we know that when we do binding in Windows Phone and in any XAML, you always have to put mode equals 2-way, and so we do. So again, for the notes, we'll put mode equals 2-way, and then we will try again. So let's do a debug start new, and up it launches, and again we won't have any data, so you know, if we go to list, there's nothing in there. But now if we go to add and we start typing I saw a moose this time, and this time it's in the picnic area. And again, you can see we've got our location known to come in. This time when we hit OK, hopefully this time it'll validate. So then we can create our collected item. And if you lose a debugger, you can see I saw a moose is in. You can see the lat and long has come in from the, and the location known has come in from the service. Notes has got in the picnic area, and when will obviously be set up as I go over this. So let's do it, F10. And then we should be able to add that to our collection service. And then we should be able to close. And now if we go back, we are back on the home page because the navigation's happened. So let's just see if we go to list. In the list now we have I saw a moose. So we should be able to go back and we should be able to add some more. And after I saw a moose, you might have, you know, let's say we're going to add all sorts of things in here. So let's also add some wine in. This wine was lush. And wine was lush. Now one thing we've got here is location known's not coming up, and the reason for that is a bug, because what's happening is that the location messenger is only getting location updates. It's not getting a constant pulse, so that's a bug that we'll have to look at fixing. But if, for example, we actually in the simulator just quickly brought up the location and tweaked it a little bit, so at the moment we're somewhere in Seattle, and if I just say we're somewhere else in Seattle, then you'll see the location known comes through. But I'll just change this message. This wine was fruity. Then we should get this saved, and again we're going to hit the breakpoints, but I'll just hit F5, and then back here we've gone back in our navigation, and we should be able to go to our list, and now you can see we get our 2 items in the list. We'll do just one more, so we go back, go to add, and as well as that we go, you know, the best donuts in Seattle, and this time I won't worry about tweaking the location, that's fine. And you know, this is Donut King. Hit OK, we go back, and in our list we've now got 3 things, and they're ordered in the way that we wanted to order them, with the most recent one at the top. So there's plenty of things we could do to enhance this app, and that's what I'll probably do in the next N+1. There's also a few bugs we've noticed. There's also this to-do we've noticed. How will we go about structuring these things? How will we build it up? That's what I'll do in the next N+1. I hope it's not gone too quickly for you, but I hope it has gone quite quickly. Because I really want to get you into the kind of flow of we're building up an app and making it bigger and bigger and bigger. Okay, excellent. I hope that's cool, and I'll be back shortly with the next N+1 on this.